Okay, so the first thing we're going to do today is breakfast cereal. I call it Nutty Crispies. One of the problems with breakfast is they're full of refined grains, sugar, high fructose corn syrup, hydrogenated oil, and all of these things are foods, or I call them non-foods, that contribute to disease, and they also make you feel terrible. They zap your energy, they make you feel lethargic, they slow down your brain function, and like I said, they contribute to disease. So I've created these Nutty Crispies, and they come in several different flavors. You can make Cocoa Crispies, Nutty Crispies, Cinnamon Crispies. It's the same basic recipe. You just flavor it up differently. And what it is it's an alternative to cold cereal. So whatever cold cereal you eat in the morning, here it is right here. You have that as an alternative, and then on the mornings where you just got to get up and go and you don't have time to cook, you can make these once, and then they are good for 2, 3, 4 weeks if you keep them in a dry, cool place, and then you have breakfast on the go whenever you want. First of all, all you need is a food processor and a few ingredients. Now, Orson Gygi carries several food processors, so if you don't have one, it's vital for healthy cooking. Go check out Orson Gygi's supply of food processors and see what they've got. You might be able to use your 10% off coupon today. The first ingredient is buckwheat groats. Now, the reason I use buckwheat is because most people are sensitive to wheat. The wheat we have now has been hybridized to contain lots more gluten than it used to in the past. And many people are sensitive to gluten, and it causes myriad of disorders such as celiac, irritable bowel syndrome, gas, it causes fatigue, skin problems. There's lots of things that are related to gluten intolerance. So this is a cereal that doesn't have any gluten in it. It's gluten-free, it's wheat-free, dairy-free, and it's a great food. So these are buckwheat groats. You can get them in the bulk section of a health food store. And what you do is you soak them overnight before you use them, and what that does is it gets them nice and soft, but also when you're using grains, traditional cultures in the past, they didn't just throw their wheat or their grain into the mill, grind it into flour, and make bread. Traditional cultures that used grain in the past, before our industrial food revolution happened, they always soaked their grains before they used them, and this helps you to digest them better. What happens is grains on the outside, in the bran of the grain, there's phytic acid in the bran or the outside of the grain, and also there's other enzyme inhibitors. So what that means is if you just grind up the grain or cook the grain, all of those enzyme inhibitors and phytic acid is going to block your absorption. The phytic acid also binds onto the calcium, magnesium, and other minerals in your system, and it makes it so that not only can you not absorb the nutrients in the food, but you can't absorb other nutrients that are coming from other food. So it's really important to soak your grains for 12 to 24 hours before you use them, and I'm going to use 2 recipes today that show you how to use soaked grains. Now, this is for all your quick breads, your regular breads, your cooked cereals in the morning, oatmeal, anything like that. It's really important to soak your grains, and I'm going to show you how to do that. It's going to improve the nutrient content of the food you're eating and also help you to be able to digest better. It also reduces any kind of sensitivity or allergic reaction you're going to have to the grains if you have that type of sensitivity. Buckwheat groats, soaked overnight. This is raw honey, and if you've been to my other classes before, one good natural sweetener you can use instead of sugar or corn syrup is raw local honey. And raw local honey is, as we've talked about before in other classes, it helps with seasonal allergies. It's a superfood, meaning it helps to modulate your immune system. It helps to clear up skin problems. It helps to balance the pH in your stomach, and so it helps with digestive disorders as well. It's a very healing food, but you have to get it raw, and so the bees are treated correctly. And if you want to learn more about that, I've got some papers and some information that I handed out in previous classes that you can learn about that. Next is cinnamon. Now, when you mix cinnamon and honey together, especially raw local honey, that is a healer. In South America, they use that as a tonic to heal people, the mixture of cinnamon and honey. I also have some stevia, some powdered stevia. Now, the reason I use a little bit of stevia in this is because When you use honey, it just gives things a honey flavor. So if you want it to be sweet but less of a honey flavor, you can use the stevia to boost the sweetness without giving it more of a honey flavor. There's several kinds of stevia. I use stevia extract because of the process. It's been fermented and the process makes it so it's more bioavailable and it doesn't have the drawbacks that just regular processed stevia has. I also use some real salt. And we talked about this last time, but real salt hasn't been processed. Normal salt has been processed at a temperature of 1200 degrees, and it makes it so it's not available for your body to absorb it, and it also causes lots of negative reactions. It's very dehydrating, so if you use real salt, it actually builds up the mineral supply in your body, and it doesn't have all the detrimental effects of regular salt. We've got vanilla. Make sure when you buy a vanilla that it's only alcohol, water, and vanilla when you read the ingredients. Most vanillas have propylene glycol and corn syrup and all sorts of nasty junk in it that you don't want to be eating, so read your labels carefully. So that's all. You just put those ingredients in the food processor and take it for a spin. Sometimes this takes a little while just to get it ground down. Okay, now I don't know if you guys can see this, but it's not a thin paste. It's still a little bit chunky. It's got some, the particles of buckwheat are still pretty large. It's not ground down into a paste. And then we're going to add pecans. Now, nuts are the same as grains. They have a phytic acid in the outside of the nuts, and so you need to soak them overnight before you use them. So these pecans, you soak them overnight, then just rinse them and drain them. And what that does is it dissolves the phytic acid off of the nuts and makes them, and all the other enzyme inhibitors, and it makes them way more usable. Now, if you put the pecans in at first, it just kind of mushes everything up into a paste. So you want to put the pecans in last after you've ground everything up and just pulse it. And all you want to do is get the pecans into nice little chunks so that they're cut up in there but not blended smooth. And as soon as the very last pecan disappears into the sea of dough, you're done. Okay, now there's two ways to make this. I make this as a raw food recipe. Now if you're a raw foodist, or if you want to keep as much of your food raw as possible, you spread this on a dehydrator sheet and then you dehydrate it at less than 115 degrees just until it's dry and crackly like the cereal. Now for those of you that don't have a dehydrator yet, I figured out a plan B so you can still enjoy the cereal. And what we're going to do is we're just going to make it on a baking sheet, and we're going to bake it at a very low temperature. So most people's ovens go down to like 200, 175 or 200 degrees. So what you want to do is pick whatever the lowest temperature your oven will go down to. And you're going to cook it at that. And so it won't be raw, but it will still have the benefits of not processing it at a high temperature. And I'm just using coconut oil here to spread on the pan, and what this does is just make it so it doesn't stick as you're cooking it. If you're doing it in the dehydrator, you don't need to worry about the coconut oil. It won't stick as much. Now when you're cooking this, it's going to take about an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, depending on your oven, what type of oven you have, what temperature it's at. So you just have to keep track of it, keep watching it until it's all nice and dry and toasty.
Could you use a parchment sheet?
Yes, you could. I don't know, I haven't tried it, but I imagine that it would work.
Could you use a Vitamixer
instead of the food processor? You could, just be very careful. The question was, could you use a Vitamix instead of the food processor? And the answer is you could, but with the Vitamix, it blends things up so smooth, you might not get the chunky texture that you're looking for, so you just have to be really careful about not blending it too much, or else you'll end up with a paste instead of a nice textured cereal. I would recommend the food processor. if you can do that, but go ahead and experiment around. If you do it in the Vitamix, I just had an idea how it's going to work for you. Make the dough, not the pecans, just the dough, and then chop the pecans by hand and hand mix them in, and don't put those in the blender. That would work.
What is your feeling about agave, using that as a sweetener?
That is a good question. There has been a lot of debate about agave nectar, and according to health experts that I've read up on, agave is, it was first touted as a raw food, as a health food, but it's closer to corn syrup than anything else, so high fructose corn syrup. So what they do is they take the agave plant and they take the root, which is really starchy, and they process it at really high temperatures, and then they put chemicals in it to transform it from one type of sugar into another type of sugar. And so it's chemically processed, it's processed at a really, really high temperature, and the end result is actually a higher fructose content than high fructose corn syrup. So where originally it was advertised as a low glycemic index food and something that could be used for diabetics and as a health food, turns out it's not. Now there is a type of agave nectar that is processed conscientiously, so they don't heat process it and they don't chemical process it. It is quite expensive, but it's true raw agave nectar. And if you can find that it's clear, like most agave nectars are a tan or a dark brown color, so the true raw agave nectar is going to be clear, and that will be better for you than the highly processed ones, but still there's a lot of debate about if that's a good idea or not. So I used to use a lot of agave nectar, and I've switched over to using more raw local honey. It's more sustainable, it's a better process, and honey is a superfood, and agave is most likely going to be detrimental unless you get the very, very expensive kind. All right. Okay, so that's all you do. You put it on the pan and then pop it in the oven. And that takes about an hour or an hour and a half, and then it turns out looking like this.